My name is Ethan Carter, and I never imagined my life would take the turns it eventually did. If you had asked me a few years ago what I wanted out of life, I would have given you the simplest of answers: peace, stability, and a place to call my own. No grand ambitions to conquer the world, no desperate need for recognition, just a quiet life built on hard work and honesty. And for a while, I thought I had exactly that. I lived in Seattle, Washington, in a modest condo in Bellevue. It wasn't glamorous, not by any stretch, but it was mine. Every inch of that place carried the weight of my sacrifices. I had spent 10 years working as an attorney at a small, respectable law firm, stashing away every paycheck, cutting corners, refusing indulgences, just so I could afford that sanctuary. While others my age splurged on the latest cars or flashy gadgets, I drove the same old hatchback I'd bought straight out of law school. Its paint was chipped, the interior smelled faintly of coffee and late-night fast food, but it carried me faithfully through every season. That condo became more than a roof over my head, it was a symbol. A testament that perseverance, no matter how quiet, pays off. And every time I turned the key to step inside, I felt something rare: pride. But pride was never something I found easily in my family. My father, Michael Carter, was a stern man. At 65, his hands still bore the hardened calluses of decades spent repairing engines in a dimly lit auto shop. He wasn't a bad man, but he was demanding, sharp-tongued, and relentless in his expectations. Growing up under his shadow, I always felt like I was being measured against an invisible yardstick, one I never seemed tall enough to meet. Then there was my brother, Dylan. 5 years younger than me, Dylan was the golden child. He had charm that could fill a room, a smile that disarmed suspicion, and an air of confidence that fooled nearly everyone around him. My father adored him. My mother, Patricia, though more gentle, also gravitated toward Dylan's energy. Where my diligence was seen as boring, Dylan's recklessness was romanticized. Where my steady paycheck was considered safe, Dylan's endless promises of success were treated like glimpses of destiny. The truth was, Dylan had no job. Not a real one, anyway. He dressed in designer clothes, wore the latest smartwatch, and posted photos on social media that painted a picture of luxury: cocktail parties, beachfront getaways, high-rise apartments with glittering skylines. But if you scratched beneath the surface, it was all smoke and mirrors. He was jobless, drifting from one supposed venture to another, always talking about investors lining up or opportunities just around the corner. And yet, despite the hollowness of it all, my parents treated him like a visionary, and me? I was the dependable one. The one who never needed rescuing, never caused a scene. In their eyes, that made me less remarkable. It didn't matter that I paid my bills on time, that I built a life brick by brick, or that I stayed true to my word. Dependability, it seemed, wasn't glamorous. I tried not to let it sting, but it did. Deep down, I longed for just a nod of approval, a moment where my father would look at me with the same pride he reserved for Dylan. That moment never came. Things took a sharp turn when my parents' living situation began to deteriorate. They'd been renting a small, worn-down house on the outskirts of Seattle. Mold crept along the bathroom tiles, the roof leaked whenever it rained, and the rent was steadily draining their limited income. My father's retirement savings were sparse, my mother's health was declining with arthritis and aching joints. The burden was becoming too much for them. I couldn't watch them struggle like that. Despite the years of favoritism, despite my own bruised feelings, they were my parents. I owed them care. So I offered a solution: why don't you move in with me? I suggested one evening over dinner. My mother's eyes softened immediately, relief washing over her face. My father frowned, as if reluctant to admit they needed help, but he didn't refuse. Within weeks, they packed up their lives and moved into my condo. I cleared out the master bedroom for them, shifting myself into the smaller guest room. I bought a new couch, a large television for my father's sports shows, even made sure the kitchen was stocked with the foods they liked best. It felt like a new chapter, one where we could heal old wounds and grow closer as a family. At least, that's what I hoped. The reality was different. My expenses skyrocketed almost overnight. Groceries, utilities, medications, repairs, everything fell squarely on my shoulders. My father's pension barely covered his personal needs, and my mother's modest savings disappeared into medical bills. I told myself I didn't mind. This was family. This was duty. But as the weeks passed, something began to gnaw at me. The silence. I came home every evening, exhausted from long hours at the firm, carrying bags of groceries or takeout so they wouldn't have to cook. I expected, if not gratitude, then at least acknowledgement. Instead, I was met with nods, half-hearted comments, or complaints. The sink's dripping again. The Wi-Fi's too slow. These groceries don't taste the same as what your mother used to buy. My mother would murmur a quiet thank you here and there, but it was fleeting, swallowed by the noise of my father's grumblings. It felt less like I had invited them into my sanctuary and more like I had handed over my life. And then Dylan began to appear. At first, it was once a week. Then twice. Soon, he was practically living in my condo without ever asking. He'd waltz in with that effortless grin, toss his coat on the couch, and raid the fridge like he owned the place. He'd spin stories of his latest ventures, dazzling my parents with tales of investors, big deals, and luxury just on the horizon. Just need a little seed money to get things rolling, he'd say, flashing that smile. And my parents? They hung on his every word. I saw the gleam in my father's eyes, the way my mother leaned forward, soaking in every promise. To them, Dylan wasn't just their son, he was their ticket to glory. The first time I caught my mother slipping Dylan cash from the household budget, I confronted her. "Mom, what are you doing?" That money was for groceries. Her cheeks flushed, and she avoided my eyes. "It's just a small loan. Dylan will pay it back." I wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it, but the sound caught in my throat. Pay it back? Dylan never paid anything back. When I pressed further, my father intervened. "Don't be petty, Ethan. Your brother has vision. Unlike you, stuck in some 9-to-5 grind. You should be proud he's aiming higher." I stood there, stunned. My sacrifices meant nothing. My steady career, my condo, the very roof over their heads, it was all invisible to them. Meanwhile, Dylan's fantasies were treated like gospel. The resentment began to build, slow and suffocating. I tried to ignore it, tried to bury it beneath a smile, but the cracks were widening. The breaking point came one evening at dinner. I had just shared a small victory at work, a case I'd won for a client that week. It wasn't earth-shattering, but it mattered to me. Before I could even finish, my father cut in. "Ethan, your brother has an idea. He just needs some capital. $120,000. That's nothing for you, with your steady job. Think of it as an investment in family." I nearly dropped my fork. "What? Dad, I don't have that kind of money to throw around. And even if I did, I wouldn't gamble it on one of Dylan's pipe dreams." The room went silent. My father's face hardened, his jaw tightening. "Don't be selfish. You've got that condo. You could remortgage it. Isn't family worth more than money?" My mother nodded softly, almost apologetically, her eyes pleading with me to agree. Dylan, of course, leaned back with a smug smile, as if victory was already his.
Driving to Lakeview that morning felt like moving through a memory I no longer belonged to. The roads were the same, lined with fading autumn leaves, but everything looked different, hollow. I sat in silence beside Alexander Beaumont, the man who was my real father. His presence was calm, steady, yet I could sense the ache beneath his quiet. Every few minutes, he would glance my way, as if reassuring himself I was real, that his son, lost for over 3 decades, was finally here. The closer we got to the old neighborhood, the heavier my chest felt. I had spent my life on these streets. Every corner carried a piece of who I used to be, Ethan Harlow, the quiet boy who thought silence could buy love. Now I was Lucas Beaumont, a name that felt both foreign and familiar, like a song I used to know, but had forgotten the words to. When we pulled up to the small bungalow with its sagging fence and uncut grass, my hands trembled. The house looked smaller than I remembered, almost fragile. I took a deep breath and knocked. Evelyn opened the door. The moment her eyes met mine, her face drained of color. For a second, we just stared at each other, mother and son, though neither word felt right anymore. Then Marcus appeared behind her, his expression unreadable, his jaw clenched the way it always was when he was cornered. "Ethan," he said gruffly. "Lucas," corrected Alexander gently. "His name is Lucas Beaumont." The air froze between us. Evelyn's lips trembled. "Oh, dear God," she whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. We stepped inside, and suddenly every object in that living room felt like a lie. The worn couch I'd repaired a dozen times, the faded photographs on the wall, the quilt draped over the chair. Each one held the ghost of a life that never truly belonged to me. Alexander laid out the documents, the DNA results, the ransom evidence, the photos from my real childhood. The truth sat heavy on the table, undeniable. Marcus's eyes darted from the papers to me, then to Evelyn, his composure cracking. Evelyn began to cry softly, whispering, "I didn't want this. I wanted to tell you." Marcus's voice was low but hard. "We did what we had to do. We wanted a better life." "For who?" I asked quietly. "For me, or for you?" He didn't answer. The silence that followed was thicker than any words could be. For years, I had begged for their approval, believed their coldness was my fault. Now I understood. It had never been about me. It was guilt. It was fear. I was a reminder of what they had stolen. Tears welled in my eyes as I looked at Evelyn. "You let me grow up thinking I wasn't enough. You watched me try to earn your love, and you never said a word." She sobbed harder. "I loved you, Ethan. Lucas, whatever your name is now. But every time I looked at you, I saw the life we ruined. I couldn't face it." Outside, sirens wailed. The sound grew louder until red and blue lights flashed through the window. I didn't move. Agents entered, calm but firm, reading out the warrants. Marcus and Evelyn didn't resist. Evelyn reached out as they led her away, her voice breaking. "I'm sorry, please, forgive me." I couldn't speak. I just stood there, watching the two people who had raised me, the only family I'd ever known, disappear into the back of a police car. I didn't feel anger, not really. Just a hollow kind of sorrow. A chapter closing, the days that followed blurred together, statements, paperwork, the quiet hum of official conversations. Through it all, Alexander stayed by my side. He didn't push, didn't demand affection or explanations. He simply stayed, patient, steady, the way real fathers do. Weeks later, after my surgery, I agreed to travel with him to Syracuse. I told myself it was just to meet my biological family, to understand where I came from. But deep down, I think I was searching for something bigger, belonging, when the Beaumont estate came into view, it was like stepping into a different world: broad gardens, stone walls, sunlight glinting off windows that seemed too perfect to be real. I hesitated at the entrance, my heart pounding. Alexander placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "No pressure," he said softly. "Just family." Sophia Beaumont, my mother, met us at the door. The moment she saw me, her face crumpled. She rushed forward and wrapped me in her arms, crying so hard she could barely breathe. "My son, my baby boy," she whispered over and over. Her warmth broke something open in me. I didn't know I still had the part that longed to be held without condition. Then my sister, Isabella, stepped forward. She was in her early 30s, kind eyes shining with tears. "You were always part of our story," she said. "Even when you were gone." She led me to a room she said they'd never changed, my nursery. My toys were still there. The walls still painted in soft blue. A framed photo of a 2-year-old version of me smiled from the nightstand. I sank to my knees and cried. For the first time in years, I didn't hold back. I cried for the life stolen, for the boy who grew up believing he was unworthy, for the parents who spent half their lives searching for a child they refused to give up on. Healing didn't happen overnight. It came in small, fragile moments. Sophia bringing me tea when I had nightmares, Alexander walking with me through the garden at sunrise, Isabella sharing stories of the brother she imagined all her life. Slowly, their warmth began to mend the cracks inside me. I started therapy. I wrote in a journal every night, trying to make sense of the two lives inside me: Ethan, the quiet welder, and Lucas, the boy who was loved before he was lost. I realized I didn't have to choose between them. They were both me. The pain had shaped me, but it didn't define me. Months later, the trial began. I attended only a few sessions. I watched Marcus and Evelyn sit in the courtroom, pale and trembling, as the truth unfolded before the world. Marcus received life imprisonment. Evelyn was given 35 years with the chance for early release. When she turned toward me, her eyes pleading, I didn't look away. I simply said, "I forgive you, not for them but for me." Because carrying hate would mean carrying their life forever, and I wanted to be free. The world called me a miracle. The Lost Heir Found reporters wrote stories about resilience, justice, and family reunions. But for me, the miracle wasn't being found. It was learning that love didn't have to be earned. That it could exist without conditions, without proof. I stayed in Syracuse, renting a modest apartment near the city's edge. I returned to welding, something simple that grounded me. On weekends, I visited the Beaumont estate for family dinners. We laughed, shared memories, and slowly built new ones together. I also began volunteering at a foundation for missing and abducted children, telling my story to families still waiting for their loved ones. Each time, I reminded them hope doesn't disappear, it just waits for its moment to return. One evening, as the sun dipped low beyond the horizon, I sat on my balcony with my journal open. The breeze was gentle, carrying the scent of autumn leaf. I wrote, "I once believed silence was my strength. But now I know it was love I was waiting for. Real love. The kind that doesn't need to be earned or proven, the kind that simply stays." And in that quiet moment, I felt peace. Not the hollow quiet of loneliness, but the deep, steady peace of belonging. I wasn't silent Ethan anymore. I wasn't stolen Lucas. I was simply myself, whole, healed, and finally home.